Holy Gospel for this morning is read from the 11th chapter of the Gospel according to St. John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus told his disciples, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll be all right." Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary stayed at home. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, they will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." He asked, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. The Jews said, "See how he loved him." Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there's a stench because he's been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Well, you've already heard it said a couple of times. Today is All Saints Sunday. In the words of our new bishop, today we face death head on and we smile at it through our faith in Christ. I love the way of putting that. Today we remember and we honor the people who inspired us and taught us by their own example what real wisdom is, what a big heart looks like, what it means to suffer and die with hope and dignity and grace, and who now know the love of God in a most personal way. One of my favorite authors, Frederick Buechner, described a saint as someone who makes you more alive when you're with them. I love that. My own life has been filled with such people, and I know that yours has too. We know how much it hurts to lose someone like that. Unfortunately, dying will always be a very real part of living, and grieving will be an essential part of loving. So today we remember those that we've lost. We thank God for putting them in our lives, even if for a short time. And we ask God to continue to bless them and care for them in a very special way. When I first came to the church some 79 days ago, I asked for a list of people and families who recently lost loved ones. 12 names were given to me. 12 beloved people closely connected to this church. Now that doesn't count neighbors and close friends and relatives and others whose deaths have hit you particularly hard. The bottom line is, I know, it came obvious to me the first day I was here, that many of you are grieving. Many of you wondering if you will ever stop grieving. If you'll ever stop feeling alone. If you'll ever feel joy again. If you'll ever be able to fully move on. I remember going to see a mother one day who had just recently lost a teenage daughter. My own mother said to me one time, "Stephen, if anybody ever tells you that they've lost a child, don't tell them you understand." And I think it was a great piece of advice. This particular day was a very warm, beautiful, sunny summer day. After knocking on the front door of the house and getting no response, I walked around to the backyard. It was a very large backyard. And I found the mother lying in a hammock underneath a huge oak tree. She was unable to speak. Her stomach and chest were heaving up and down. She was crying so hard. That image has always stuck with me. That's what losing someone you love can do for you. It can feel so overwhelming, so huge, so final, so debilitating and paralyzing, sometimes like you just can't even speak. They tell you in seminary that you should avoid telling personal stories in your sermons. And probably that's a good idea for the most part. But today I'd like to ask your indulgence as I share with you the story of this beautiful girl whose photograph I brought today. This is Donna, who died as a young teenager. I was 6 years old at the time. Donna was not only my big sister, but she was also my best friend. She was my hero in life, and she was my second mom. She was born with a problem in her heart. Nothing too serious, the doctor said. In fact, it could be easily repaired or corrected through what was described as routine surgery. As it turned out, that surgery was anything but routine. Her heart unexpectedly stopped in the middle of surgery, and the surgeons were never able to restart it. My sister, my best friend, my hero, my second mom, was gone. So how do you explain that to a 6-year-old? I have a very vivid memory of my mother sitting on my bed late one night, trying to tell me why it was that Donna would never be returning home. Her words made absolutely no sense to me. Of course Donna would be coming home. Donna always came home. Why would anything be different on this particular day? What was my mom saying? Days later, Donna's funeral was held at Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Billings. I sat in the front row with my parents and 3 brothers, and more specifically, I sat between my mother and my oldest brother Leo, who at that time was a big Marine, and he was on leave from his work in the Marines to come home for his sister's funeral. Donna's open casket was at the front of the church, just a few feet in front of me. I could clearly see her lying there, sound asleep. At one point, I remember looking around the church, and I noticed that everyone's eyes were filled with tears. And I turned to my mother and I said, "Why is everyone crying?" Because my mother said Donna is sleeping, and she won't ever wake up. Well, that was absurd. Again, why would Donna not wake up? Donna always woke up. Do you want her to wake up? I said to my mother. Stephen, I want her to wake up more than you could ever imagine. I would do anything to get her to wake up. But she won't. She can't wake up. "Oh, she'll wake up for me," I said. "I'll go wake her up." And with that, I started toward the front of the church so I could go wake her up, as I had done 100 times before in her room early in the morning. Before I could even move 2 feet, my big Marine brother grabbed me. "You can't go up there," he said in his big, rough Marine voice. The more I tried to wiggle my way out of his grasp, the tighter he held on to me. "Donna's dead," he said. "She's not going to wake up." And you know, that was the first time that I ever remember hearing that D word. A few minutes later, a couple of men came to the front of the church, closed the box, turned some screws on the side of the box, and locked her in. Later that day, the box was lowered into the ground at the cemetery, and it was then that it hit me that I would never see my sister again. It was my first real understanding of the nature and magnitude of this thing my brother called death. I can't even tell you how long it took me to forgive my brother for not letting me go wake up my sister. It was many, many years before I was finally old enough to understand that death meant that she never would and never could have awakened for me or anyone else. That was nearly 60 years ago. And to this day, I haven't stopped grieving. She was so joyful, and her love of a little brother was so full and unconditional. Have I learned to move on? Yes. Have I found a way to stop the hurt? Not yet. The hurt will never stop. And I know that many of you know exactly what I mean. Medical textbooks make it sound so sterile. A watery, slightly alkaline secretion from the lacrimal glands which serves to moisten the conjunctiva. Most of us just say, my eyes are filled with tears. When you lose someone you love, it can take a long, long time for those tears to go away, if they ever go away. Today we lift up the tears that we've shed because we've lost someone we loved. Tears that many of us have shed, and I would say, and you know, tears are important. They help us express ourselves in a way that simple words can't. There truly is something healing and cathartic about tears, and yet aren't there times that we think how nice it would be if we didn't have to go through these times of hurting so much that our eyes are drenched with tears, and our chests and our stomachs heave up and down. We can hardly breathe. Listen again to the words of the prophet Isaiah. The Lord of hosts will swallow up death forever. He will wipe away the tears from all faces. Won't it be great when that time finally comes? But for now, death and tears will continue to be a very real part of what it means to be human. One of the most powerful stories in all of the scriptures is the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And the story is so rich and full that I could spend 45 minutes telling you all the intricacies of the story, and I won't. But the whole point of the story seems to be that if Jesus can raise someone from the dead after 4 days, I mean, that seems ludicrous to us, right? But then doesn't the story imply that nothing is impossible for Jesus? Jesus can do anything. We need to hear that, especially when we're grieving, especially when our eyes are filled with tears and our spirits filled with sadness. The Lazarus story is powerful for many reasons, but it's especially powerful for my son Ryan. When my kids were being confirmed in the church, it was traditional in that congregation for each confirmand to choose a Bible verse that somehow reflected their faith and their personality. And as the confirmand's name was read that Sunday morning when they were confirmed, the Bible verse would be read right after their name was spoken. I didn't actually know what my son's Bible verse was until it was read that morning of his confirmation, when someone said, Ryan Michael Olson, John 11, verse 35, Jesus wept. There were snickers in the church that morning when it was read. Other confirmands chose much longer verses, more dignified verses, verses that were far more appropriate for the occasion, but not my comic son Ryan, who, by the way, once won the award in high school for being teacher's pest. Jesus wept was his verse. His friends figured it was Ryan's way of Ryan being Ryan, trying to be funny, suggesting that the whole reason Jesus was weeping was that Ryan was getting confirmed. Giggle, giggle, snickler, snickler, you could hear it in the church. I must admit, I was suspicious of Ryan's motives too. I thought, oh, my son. Later I asked Ryan why he chose that verse, and this is what he said. Because, Dad, it shows how human Jesus was. Jesus had tears just like I have tears, and if that's how Jesus is, that's the kind of Jesus I want to know. That's the kind of experience as a parent that when you hear that, you pat yourself on the back and say, maybe we did something right. How interesting that today's first Bible reading tells us of God's promise to one day wipe away the tears from all eyes, and then the very last Bible reading shows Jesus' own eyes filled with tears. What an interesting contrast. Jesus, in other words, being fully human. He knows what it's like to feel kicked in the gut by the death of a loved one. He knows how you feel. Today we stand in an awkward place. On the one hand, grieving loss. On the other hand, rejoicing in God's promise that death is never God's final word. God's final word is always life. And God's unshakable promise is that someday there will be no more death and every tear will be wiped away. St. Paul wrote to the Romans, I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Did you notice what the first thing he mentioned was? Death. Because he knew that that's what we fear most. You who have lost someone, think about the enormity of his words. There is nothing in all creation that can keep us from the love and promises of God, nothing, especially not death. On this All Saints Sunday, we give thanks to God for the saints whose presence in our lives made us feel more alive, whose memory still leaves our eyes filled with tears. Thank God for those who have taught us that no matter what happens in life or in death, we are connected to Jesus forever. May God keep our loved ones and us in his grace and care. Amen. Now we're going to be singing hymn number 422 for all the saints. And during the